Take a moment and have a deep, way down deep in your belly, relaxing breath. And recall to mind all of the beautiful moments and beings, relationships, accidents, wonders, all of the beautiful dreams, all of the beautiful beings, as one family, one animal, one creature, one being, the being you are, right now. Take a moment and let that moment expand outwards from this moment, throughout all of the branches and paths of your feelings as a human being, of your life, of those you love and those who love you, and those they love, and those who love them. Take a moment in beauty to remember. To be remembered. In sunlight, in darkness, in wonder, in beauty. Remember the breeze traveling through the living land. Remember the ancient waters that come from the sky. Remember the sunlight, the golden warmth. Remember the living light of the plants and trees. Remember friendship and care, kindness and concern. Remember compassion. Remember your first footsteps. The first time you saw the sky. The first time you saw the stars with your living eyes. Remember the first time you related with an animal. The first flower whose scent was drawn into your body. As you breathed it in. Remember the first time you ate food. Remember. The fog flowing across the landscape of the evening. The clouds swimming in the beautiful sky of this world. Remember the first time someone bathed you in warm water. Remember the first time. Remember your first friend. Take a moment and breathe. For all of the mystery of being, and all of its tragedy and heroism, is yours. Forever. Without exception. Remember. For the sake of beauty and healing, for the sake of well-being, for the sake of all beings, take a moment and remember now, together. When I came outside today, in the late afternoon, I saw the sun. So beautiful, so impossible, so gentle, really, in our time, though it hasn't always been that way. And my heart was glad. I was gladness in my heart to see the sun. And the tree outside my home. I was so glad to see the tree. It shields my home and dreams with me at night. It protects me, and we love each other. And then as I was walking, I turned around and saw the moon. I can see her now. Like a physical angel. In the daytime, the sun is very bright when the sky is clear. And it's hard to look at the sun directly, with open eyes, though one can do it and not be harmed. Right now I see a bird, and I'm not sure what it is. Though I have a word for it. Or rather, I remember what it is, but it isn't like words. It's not like ideas. It's not like language at all. It's impossible. To be alive this way, and yet we are, for a time. When I looked at the moon shining in the daylight, I thought suddenly about indirection. In thought and language and communication. About the way of implying but without stating. The other night I was speaking with my friend William far away, and we could both see the moon. Even though he was thousands of miles away, we could look at the same thing together at the same time, in the sense of meaning, we are both doing this now. But our eyes could touch the same object that were thousands of miles away from each other, together, at night. When I saw the moon, I realized how important indirection is. To suggest without declaring, and thereby leave an interval, a spaciousness, that the imagination can inhabit and explore. A way to see sunlight, but not directly, reflected. Without the sun and the moon, in exactly the places they travel in relation to the earth. It's not clear there'd be life here. And if there were, it wouldn't be life like us. It would be different life. One can indirectly see the sun's light by looking at the moon. And that's a miracle. Of course, there isn't anything that's not miraculous, fundamentally. And when I was thinking about indirection, I was thinking about the sun and the moon, and I was thinking about the qualities we associate with masculinity and the qualities we associate with femininity. And one might say, oh, these are deceptive conveniences, and not be entirely confused. But there's something deeply true about many of the polarities up and down, right and left, dark and light, kind and cruel, warm and cold, life and death, health and illness, the sun and the moon, male and female, empty and full. these ideas, these words, are not what they point at, but what they point at is real to our common experience. And while there's a place in awareness beyond all polarity, and that place is worthy of recognizing, it's still true that female birds lay eggs and male birds fertilize them. There's a polarity here that's quite profound with the birds that I love. The female of this pair is in her ways reserved. She does not come to my hand with the audacity that the male does, to take one of the pieces of food that I offer them as a gift of love. She stays up high, watching. In a sense, watching over him. And he goes down low and hunts and forages and adventures with the strange monster that wears clothes and makes recordings. And he likes risk. He'll take the risk of coming to my hand. And part of the reason he can take that risk with confidence is that he knows me. But another part of what helps him to be able to be audacious is that she's watching over him. And not just him, but everything here, all of life here. She's watching and learning. And when he adventures, she goes with him. And when she's reserved and cautious, he is with her. I'm sure there have been some cultures that thought of the sun as feminine and the moon as masculine. And yet, the sunlight penetrates everything, fertilizing, warming, shining. And the moonlight seems to me more gravitic. And of course, the moon is the closest source of gravity around here. And so we feel it deep inside us all the time without knowing, without being conscious of these feelings. Our bodies have known the moon since before we were animals. Our bodies have known the sun since before we were animals. Every human, every creature that had eyes saw the moon. If it lived long enough, every creature saw the sun. But even those without eyes, they felt them, the warmth and the gravity, together. The sun is so bright that we see because of it. This is a rare use of the word because that I trust. The moon we can look at very safely. The boy bird is here with me. And the girl bird is watching over him nearby. The feeling of his claws on my hand for an instant as he takes the food is quite profound and lingers for some time. I still feel it. Feelings and forms of awareness, they have a temporality, they have a span. I can still feel the tap of his claws on my fingers that sometimes almost penetrates my skin. I trust him, and he trusts me. I trust her, and she trusts me. And trust can be broken. I remember a time when the girl was teaching me something, but it was hard at first to understand. And because I didn't understand at first, she became upset and made alarm calls and flew away from me. And I wondered why. Until later, when I saw that where we had been standing, there was a hawk nearby. And then I understood. And I think somehow she knew that I understood later. But at the time, she must have wondered. Something like, why would I offer her food when a hawk is right above us? But you see, she knew that the hawk was above us because her awareness encompassed much that mine did not. Of course, the gravity of the sun is quite profound as well, but it's different than that of the moon. And this is the problem with words. it's too easy to suppose that the things we name with words are in fact the same, when it's certainly more true that they are not. The words are strange generalizations, and that's both useful and dangerous. This word gravity, it comes from a word gravid that means filled with eggs. When the female praying mantis is preparing to lay her egg case, and she may or may not have been fertilized by a male, she is gravid. And when she is gravid, she changes. Her way of being in the world is very different. And in my experience, often more fierce, a bit ravenous. I remember when I was very small, I had a praying mantis who was my friend. And she lived in the garden and I knew her. There were other mantises, but I knew her. And when she became pregnant, one day on my very small finger, she looked at me and tilted her head to the side in that peculiar way that we're used to only animals doing, even mammals, particularly humans. And then she bent down and took a bite out of my fingertip and ate it. It hurt, and I was frightened for a moment. But something quite profound was happening there. I don't think it was merely that she was hungry, and I don't believe she had the intention to harm me. Of course, imagination is an astonishing thing to have. Perhaps the root of every faculty. Perhaps not, too. But perhaps the culmination of our faculties, the integration of our faculties. Many years later, when I reflected on that moment, it occurred to me that what she was doing was joining us together. And not just me and her, but all of my children in the future, and all of my ancestors in the past, and all of her children in the future, and all of their ancestors in the past. In a way, we were getting married. Of course, as a child, I was confused and couldn't think in such sophisticated terms yet. Gravity. Sometimes when I was little, I would look up at the sky, and it seemed to me there was a way to invert the polarity, and even that it was possible I might do so accidentally if I wasn't very careful. And so, instead of being drawn down to the earth, I would fly up into the sky lost forever. Traveling, traveling, up and up and up. I still have that feeling sometimes. And I like to think that there's a sky our minds and hearts were born for. That the skies of earth are the invitation to. The other day, I was sunning myself. And I have lots of adventures with the boy, the boy bird, who's here with me right now. And he's very demonstratively eating a peanut. Of course, it could be the girl. Sometimes it's hard to tell them apart. But before he opened, or she opened the peanut, the bird made calls to attract my attention. They like to be with me. And I like to be with them. And it's not just because I bring them food. We bide together in the day. For life is brief, and love is beautiful, and nourishing, and true. So the boy and I have adventures together because he's bold. And he likes to have adventures with me, and I like to have adventures with him. But the other day, a few weeks ago, I sat down on a bench where I often meditate, and I took off my shirt and my shoes and socks. And that must have been an interesting moment because the birds had not seen me do this, though they've seen other things. So I was sitting in the warm sun, and the girl came near and looked at me for a moment. And then she brushed out a cup. She made a little crater in the bark nearby. And then she fluffed up and spread her wings and tail all out and canted her head to the side and sunbathed with me. And we were sunbathing together. And that was a soft adventure. A remembrance of unity. You know, when we were very small, our hearts were shining. with original light. And we'd come to the mysterious world as if we were the first being ever born in it. And we were filled with love, or love was filled with us, or something even more beautiful that I cannot hope to say in ordinary language, but everything was our friend, and all the beings were our companions. And there was no prejudice, no hatred, no anger, just wonder. Wouldn't it be amazing to preserve that all throughout our lives? And of course, deep inside us, there's a sanctuary where all of these things are preserved, and perhaps deep isn't the right word. It's the word we commonly use. Moment to moment in life, it's easy to become confused with superficial concerns and fears and courtrooms, language and models and ideas and science and religion and concepts and opinions, politics and news, headlines. A funny word, headline. These days, the headlines have become extremely toxic and bizarre in their power to warp language and identity and meaning and circumstance in such a way that I think most of us are made dumber every time we see one. My relationship with the girl is indirect. She wants more space between us. And that doesn't mean less intimacy. In fact, it often means more intimacy. There are different modes of intimacy, and the Sufis are adept at understanding this, the difference between the direct and the indirect, and the peculiar profundity of the indirect. If someone asks casually how I am, I may answer in different ways. But the music in my voice, right, will say far more than the words do. If there's a couple, perhaps this couple are both women or they're both men biologically. And the one who is working comes home after work, and the one who is homemaking has been at home all day. And the one who comes home says, "How was your day, dear?" And the one who is home says, "It was okay." You can hear in the music that something's missing. And maybe they have a routine. And maybe sometimes the one who is home goes to work, and the one who works is the home. There are many tropes around what we consider these days, what we speak about as traditional gender roles. And I find all of this rather troubling, though I can understand some of the imperatives or purposes that have produced the great confusion we presently enjoy. You know, the typical gender trope is that the man goes to work and the woman is the homemaker. And there's every kind of variance of that, and that's entirely natural. Except where it isn't, except where it's been imposed somehow. But I just mean that long ago it occurred to me in a very clear way that every moment of expression of a human being is a unique moment of mixtures of gender potentials. Every exchange has both and more. And is never just one thing, because underneath the masculine is the feminine. Perhaps inside the feminine is the masculine. Perhaps surrounding the masculine is the feminine. And extending from the feminine is the masculine. But there's something to the polarities that we shouldn't lose sight of. I won't say the sun is a boy and the moon is a girl. Actually, I just said that. And yet, there's a natural kind of intuition that's far deeper than words and concepts, ideas and models. And we have senses for the polarities. We just don't have names for them. They all get lumped together under intuition. When children are little, and they're very small, they don't communicate with words. They may use sound, but they use it in a more primordial way. I remember there's a store by my home with a very high ceiling. It's wide open up there. And because of the acoustics of the building, it's possible to make an extremely loud sound in there. And one day, I was there getting something, probably milk. And a young mother had her infant in her arms. And the infant, well, I hadn't noticed it, really. but it suddenly emitted this incredibly piercing tone, incredibly high-pitched, and in the structure of the building, that sound penetrated everything. It overwhelmed everything. It was like a shout of enlightenment. It was entirely non-ordinary, and at the same time perfectly ordinary. And the mother, who was a few feet in front of me, she looked embarrassed or concerned suddenly, and she said, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, there's no need to apologize. They're like little dolphins, aren't they? They're touching the world with their sound. And the mother just lit up. And I lit up. We both lit up. Everybody lit up. And it was beautiful. Because we remembered each other, and proprieties were set aside in favor of the primordial. And that's a beautiful moment. That's a moment of being less wrong. And you can't really explain it, even though I'm having a go at it. Or perhaps, at least, I'm trying to describe it. I'm not afraid to say what is sensible to me. About our natures, our origins, about gender. Even though this topic has become extremely confusing. And it's certainly true that there's a problem, or a library of problems, that are our historical inheritances that involve prejudice. I remember I had visited a young rabbi here in town. We used to get together once a month and have a singing night where we would all sing together. And this was a traditional kind of thing. And I was an outsider because I'm not Jewish. And there were women and men, both. And I was fascinated with them and the singing that we did together, and just the fact that we were doing it. And I was very hopeful that we could all learn together. And I remember a man, one time when we were alone together on a walk, he turned to me. He was a young man, very beautifully minded in his way, but also confused in his way, much as I am. He turned to me and he said, "You understand, don't you, that the women are our property, like cattle or something we own." And this is a very old problem, ancient problem, that has bred terrible suffering on earth. The unjustified presumption that the man is supreme. A very bizarre presumption, in my mind, in all kinds of ways, but the simplest being that every man who ever lived began his existence as an organ in the body of his mother. And her body made an organ that could go outside of her in the world in a way different from how she is in the world. The two birds are both audacious. They're just differently audacious. And when I was young, I clove to my mother. And though I was audacious and had some courage, it was a different kind of courage. It wasn't the courage to fight or win. It was the courage to love and include. It was warm and soft and vulnerable and sensitive. And these are qualities that are traditionally associated with the feminine. But those associations are not explicit. They're not laws, they're not rules. They're inheritances in thinking and categorization and classification. Which means they're very fuzzy and can transform in all kinds of ways in any individual, in any group. And yet, you know, these questions have many layers, right? At the layer of biology, men don't have wombs. Women don't have testicles. But at the layer of identity, how we think of and see ourselves in the world, the physical basis is neither the beginning nor the end. It's a potential that can transform in an instant. I'm not afraid to talk about men and what I know of them, or women and what I've learned of them. And there's certainly a woman inside me. But I don't have to decide that the qualities of my being are either masculine or feminine. In fact, I can recognize them without that overlay. And in that sense, they're like constellations of potentials that transform over time and circumstance. In my life, I have fought little and loved much. But given a choice, I'd still have fought less and loved more. Oh, how I love the living beings. What a privilege it is to exist on a world so diversely embodied in endless forms and ways. Some that fly and some that crawl, some that are gigantic and some that are small. Some are tiny, some are vast. Some just starting, some departing. Some are first, some are last. It's a very strange wonder to live in this time, 2021. When I was a child, this was the distant future. And back in the 60s and 70s, we imagined, as you can see, our species is still deluded by this idea that technology would rescue us from everything. We could do away with war and pollution and disease and hatred and prejudice and privilege, and we could live together in harmony with and for each other and the history and future of life on Earth, which is how I want to live. Or a way of saying something about what I believe in living for. It's a great blessing to have tissues. But the tissues come from trees. I'm grateful for the tiny blessings. Well, they're not tiny really, but to have clothing. That when I turn on the faucet in my home, fresh water comes out. Of course, it's poisoned by chlorine and who knows what else now. But I have a water filter too. I can cook food. I can obtain food, and I don't have to kill it to eat it. And some would say that's hypocritical, and I won't argue with them at the root. But I'm not made for killing. Though I suppose in the right circumstances, I can kill. And I have killed. I've killed creatures. I deeply regret it. But I have killed. And I've harmed myself in various situations with fear or anger, resentment, spitefulness, vengefulness. But anger does not come naturally to me. I think it's funny that the word danger can be seen as a peculiar French word, or maybe a last name, the anger, right? The anger, danger. I trust indirection more in language and communication than I trust assertion, declaration. And the reason is simple. Indirection has spacious dimensionality, whereas assertion and declaration, they kind of tell us what to see or think. I'm very suspicious of that. And it's a bit bizarre in the gender dialogue to see the the lay of the landscape and how declaration has become a kind of disease in the quest for something we imagine to be equality. But equality cannot and must never be imposed. Equality is the result of meaningful relational contexts and roles and behaviors. If we don't establish those together, moment to moment, day by day, and preserve and nurture and grow them, then what we'll have is not equality. What we'll have is hatred. What we'll have is new forms of prejudice, and anger, danger. And I'm not for that. Insight and compassion, wonder and mutual concern, these are principles that are deeply important to me. But they can't be enforced. They have to naturally emerge in contexts where we're being truly human together, like we were when we were little, most of us. And we must remember always the incredible uniqueness of any individual, profoundly unique. No matter what qualities we may associate with them, like some kind of shopping list. Oh, he's strong, he's fierce, she's strong, she's fierce. Oh, he's soft, he cries. Oh, she's soft, she cries. The boy is audacious, the girl is reserved. And there are many facts that again are generalizations, and so we should leave a lot of space for their exceptions. But men have been fighting and killing and hunting for many, many, many generations. And women have been gathering and nurturing, cooking food for many, many generations. And this doesn't tell us what men are or what women are. What it's useful for is to understand that some of the qualities we associate with genders, however confusedly we may do so, are not entirely inappropriate. Yes, women can hunt and fight. Yes, men can love and mother. But our bodies, unique in each individual, still express the ancient histories, not merely of our people, but life on earth. The music of voices tells more than the words, or at least without the music, the words are woefully incomplete and may easily deceive us, especially if we want to believe the words and are unused to listening to the music. Now the sun is setting and the daylight moon is shining. That moon above us is reserved, in a sense. And it protects the earth and nurtures it. Its gravity informs the character of time. All different kinds of time, not just the minute, hour, day, week, month, year time. No. Relational time. The moon is not a clock. And I strongly suspect that the moon and the sun are forms of being. They are not things, the way our language implies. They are beings. Or even, they belong to a class we have crude language for. Deceptive language. For they are not merely beings, they are more than beings. There are beings because there is a sun and a moon here. You see? In a very real sense, they are parental. And both of them are married in us. One might say we are the produce of their lovemaking. And to some this will seem poetic or unjustly metaphysical. And yet, our knowledge ways are so primitive that rather than revealing the nature of our being and origin, spirit, heart, they occlude them much more often. Indirection. To communicate by inviting our companions into deeper intimacy beyond language. This is indirection. And if I were brilliant, then I could give examples and metaphors. But I'm not feeling particularly articulate at the moment. Rather, I'm feeling calm and gentle. But if you watch your own communications and the communications of others in all their breadth and scope and depth, you will see that the language and the declarations are often very shallow compared to the invitations and the suggestions. Ambiguity, the inclusion of ambiguity in our communications behaviors is the primary direction of liberty for our minds, ideas, and relationships, because it gives play. It opens what is otherwise very closed and creates possibilities, pathways, where otherwise we have obstacles. The sun, when cloaked with clouds, its light inherits ambiguity from the water in the atmosphere. And we associate water with the feminine. This is not unjustified, as in fact, just before we're born, the waters in the womb depart. And I suppose we associate fire with masculinity. And this is also a solar analogy. We must be careful, I think, not to allow our concerns, our very important and valid concerns, about equality to evict ambiguity from our thought, awareness, access, and relation. That's a tragic loss. But that danger is part of what casts light on a path we can trust more and embody together more deeply. The things we think of as bad are not merely bad. Without them, we would not understand the danger. We might become insensate, right? Insensitive. In thought, belief, behavior, opinion. I was very surprised to hear what the young rabbi said to me about the women. In one sense. In another sense, I understood he was saying something like, well, we are a traditional people. We have traditions. But he was also saying, because I can be rather enchanting, he was saying, do not enchant our women. They belong to us. It's not my intention to dissect his statement. I merely used it as an example to illustrate long histories, strange histories. And there's something to these histories, even though I recoil from the idea that women should be thought of as property. Everything in me recoils from this. And ever since I was a child, I could see the power in the women and the difference between its depth and breadth and spaciousness and what most of the boys or men were doing and thinking and being. The difference I could see. But I could also see how each child was incredibly unique. For all the child might resemble some idea or model. And this incredible uniqueness is something we should pay very close attention to, because in our time it's disappearing into words and categorizations, characteristics. There's so much more to know and learn and see and grow toward than our ideas are likely to reveal or even preserve. And in the age of science and rationality and technology, we're in great danger, all of us, uniquely and generally, of losing touch with our capacity to sense the beautiful opportunities of our human incarnation. As if history were waves of terrible forgetting in the wake of the capacity to represent things, to measure things, to analyze them, to think that the statistical average or mean tells us what or who someone is or something is. Which of course can never be true. Hey man, good to see you. Is Brian really a man? Well, provisionally, and perhaps biologically, yes. Is he more a man than he is a being? No. You see, here's the freedom. A being has plenty of ambiguity space. A man has less. A warrior has less. Though I'm resistant to labels, I'm not afraid to use them, but I try to keep learning how to use them more intelligently, in the sense where intelligence means insight, seeing into. And I'm deeply motivated to seek insight. I wish to see. Knowing is a different thing, particularly in representational thought. There is the other kind of knowing. There are many kinds of knowing, right? To know food by tasting it has little to do with what it is called, or even what it is composed of. To know another by caressing them has nothing to do with representations. Most of the kinds of knowledge that I deeply value, and of course in my waking mind, it's like, it's a bit like the sun in that the sun tells you what colors things are, whereas the moon, it's all shadings and mystery and pareidolia. Shapes in shadows can seem to come to life and transform. And is that an animal? Is it a rock? We don't know at first. And in that not knowing, there's an incredible intimacy that is lost when we decide, oh, it's someone's backpack. And then we're done with it, you see? This is the problem. In the place of not knowing, there is real intimacy, because our senses all come to life and awaken. Our curiosity, our fear, our wonder. In the ambiguity, there's space for all of that. Once we know what it is, few of us can preserve the liberties that otherwise disappear there. The sun has set, not quite completely, but the reddish light is on the trunks of trees. In the morning, the bluish light will come. And at night, the moon will shine for a while before she sets. I'd give it 7 hours by my estimate. If you see the moon, think of me. And when I see the moon, I will think of you. And we can be together in ways our modernity too easily deprives us of. And we can be remembered to our original light, to the great adventure of being embodied in time and space. We can be together in the beautiful, dreaming way that all of life composes with and for all beings. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Isn't that truth, unclothed by thought, idea, category? I am for the living beings. I am for all the beings in all of time. For me, they are my friends, my body, my origin, my companions, my hope, my love, my wonder. I just experienced the ambiguity. I looked at a tree and a branch seemed to be an owl for a moment, until my perspective shifted and the ambiguity faded away into knowledge. I love the many beings. May your paths in life be sweet and beautiful and true. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye for now.